What? Where'd she go? Today.
I'm gonna just close this door.
Okay. Right, thank you. Yeah. Okay. Hi, Karen.
Hi, Joy.
Hi, Karen. How are you?
Good. I just wanted to make sure I could hear you.
Okay, I think you can. I can hear you.
So it doesn't look I have to do anything for you to
No.
participate. Okay, so that makes it a little easier.
Yeah. It is when it works. It's so much easier.
That's right.
And when it doesn't, it's so crazy. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Joy.
How are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
Pretty good. Did you enjoy the warm weather today?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Gosh, it was so warm.
It was. It's teasing us though. It's going to be warm like it's spring and then it's going to start snowing again.
I know.
Typical
Started thinking
Colorado.
about outside plants. Hi, Doug. I think that's Doug.
I am losing my mind today.
I
It's
see
taken
Pamela.
3 times to get in.
Oh,
I've had internet problems all day. I've had people working on it all day. And I'm finally in.
yay,
Hi.
yes.
Hi,
It's
Ann.
so frustrating,
Pamela.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, hi, everybody. I'm subbing in for Dylan this evening.
Cool. Hi, Karen.
Hey, hi, Tamala. So let's see, most of you, I promoted to panelists, so that will enable you to, and let's see, it looks like Rebecca, you're
Hi, Rebecca.
here and you should be able to.
I'm not usually on camera. I don't want to distract, but I can be. It's no problem. Just letting you know.
I think the panel is, the commission members, I think, are on.
Right. We're just missing Doug, it looks like.
Yep.
Hi, Austin.
Everybody, good to see you all again.
I could throw a rock up there at Doug. He's just right there at his house.
Not a big rock.
Not a big rock, but just, enough to go, hey, remember?
I'm missing. He may be having internet problems too then.
I know.
You are.
Do you have any leaves coming out yet, Ann, on your trees?
No,
No.
not at all.
My apple tree is trying to bud.
Oh, no.
Really?
I should
No,
look at my apricot too.
I think we're colder up here, maybe.
Oh, okay.
There's no evidence of any spring.
I have daffodils and lilies and allium and hyacinths all poking out of the ground several inches.
Really?
Wow.
Whoa.
So are you on the north side?
Yeah, you're on the
Yeah.
north side. Yeah,
Yeah, we're on the sad south side.
yeah.
So
We
big
still got
time.
ice and snow over here.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Doug just joined us.
Good.
Okay.
Yep, there he is. All right.
So let's see here. I think he should be good to go now.
There he is.
Hi,
Well,
guys.
Hi, Doug.
Doug.
For you.
For a few
Everybody good?
minutes till 6.
Yep.
Hi, Doug.
And Rebecca Allen, is she joining as an alternate or?
No, she takes minutes.
Oh, okay.
So
That's right.
we usually don't see her, but that's okay.
All right. And then we have, just kind of looking to see who's all here. All right, folks. How is everyone this evening?
Good.
Great.
Good. Hi, Tamala.
I have internet. Yay!
Yay, yeah, you look pretty smooth tonight.
Yeah.
That's good. Joy, looks like you're home.
For about 3 weeks and then I'm gone again.
Oh
Okay.
my.
Mm,
Yeah, it was a long 4 months about.
Good.
And then I'll go back and be there probably maybe 3 more months. maybe
wow.
2.
Wow.
Yeah, it's there -8, 10 degrees is warm, so
Wow.
Wow.
it's
She's
cold.
upstate,
No,
right?
It's upstate, more towards the center part. up towards the Canadian border, that area, you know, and it
Oh.
gets the Canadian air,
Wow.
not that
Yeah.
far. Yeah, so it's lots of snow and it doesn't melt because the sun is the same color as the snow all winter.
Lake
Yeah.
effect snow.
It is lake effect, it's Lake Ontario and Cazenovia Lake, and
Mm.
yeah, it's amazing how much snow falls, but the birds are coming back, which is amazing because there's a lot of feeders where I'm staying and so many birds, cardinals and blue jays
Lovebirds.
are coming back, and
Cardinals.
cardinals, I
Yeah.
know they're so red against the snow.
If global warming happens for us, maybe we'll get cardinals, you know, Colorado
pretty
eventually.
Right.
One good thing.
One good
Yeah,
Polar
thing.
bears are gone, but we have cardinals.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got a spotlight shining right down on me. I look like I'm heavenly or something. There, that's a little better.
That's good.
Very good. Talk about heavenly. That's a nice window behind you, Susan. That's something else. Is that in your house?
Thank you. Yes, it is.
That's magnificent.
Yeah.
Is that original to the building?
I don't know what year they put it in. No, it was added to the building. It was a window that was reframed and cut to be just the size of the window in the building. But my husband's grandparents had it done and put in.
Very nice. Well, since it appears that we're all here and I don't see any of our alternates here, and I also don't see that Mr. Shada from council is joining us either. So I'm going to go ahead and call to order the March 22nd, 2022 regular meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission. We'll go ahead and take a roll call and introduce ourselves. I'm Douglas Keithley Edmondson, Chair of the Historic Preservation Commission.
Susan,
I'm Tamala Wright.
I'm Joy Porter.
And Nichols.
Susan Presti, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Susan. I think that accounts for all of us. And then we have also in attendance this evening, Karen Burke-Told, who is taking the place of Dylan Becker as our interface with the planning department, and then Austin Pierce Flanagan. Austin, I do believe that you are representing the city's attorney's legal firm. And then, of course, we have Rebecca Allen, who is taking minutes for us. And then I see other participants in the audience, and if we may get to that, but I don't believe so. All right. With that said, we'll go ahead and move forward. And I'm going to, Joy and Ann, I'm going to rely on you two again for some more guidance on how to handle the meetings, because I'm still a bit of a novice, and I do, again, very much appreciate your assistance in the matter. I don't believe we go into any sort of public comment or public opinion at this time. We just go ahead and move to section 2, approval of minutes from our February 2nd, 2022 regular meeting. I've reviewed them. All looks good to me.
I
And
have
does-
several corrections.
Okay,
Okay.
Susan's got a couple of
Susan.
corrections for us.
Okay, first of all, on page 1, approval of minutes. The second, it says Vice Chair Porter. I think that should be Commissioner Porter rather than Vice Chair.
Yes, because I'm not the vice chair.
You're not the Vice Chair
Good
anymore.
catch, good catch, Susan.
On page 2, there's a sentence that I can't understand. I don't know. It's under unfinished business, section 3, unfinished business, about 2/3 of the way down the page. The sentence reads, Jake Lloyd responded that the buildings on the east side of the building could have been built prior to the cabins, and the contributing structure on the east side of the property remained. I just don't understand that sentence. I'm wondering if it's the buildings on the east side of the property was what we meant to say, but I'm not quite sure that I understand. And Karen, you probably can't enlighten this since you were not taking the minutes for that meeting.
You can change that. I can just make those corrections.
Okay, I at least changed the word from east side of the building to east side of the property, I believe is what we were talking about, wasn't it, Doug?
What was that again, Susan? That was the east. He was talking about a structure that was on the east side of a building, and only the east side of the building remained. because he might have been talking about the addition on the east side of the lodge where the kitchen area was. That's in question of its structural integrity.
Oh,
I don't know if he was, I don't remember instructional integrity, maybe.
Yeah.
Huh, I don't know.
I don't remember what this was about, and then reading it, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Why
what it's-
don't we just take it out? Yeah, I don't think it's germane to
Yeah.
the discussion at
Okay.
all. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Thanks for reading the minutes, though.
And then the final correction I have is under other business. Halfway down.
What
It's,
page?
commissioners were amenable to this situation. I think it should read commissioners were amenable to this suggestion, because it refers to Chair Edmondson's suggestion on the previous sentence.
Thank you.
So
Sorry
I,
about that.
I would move approval of the minutes with those 3 corrections, unless somebody
And
has something else.
I do also, Susan, thanks for dialoguing a little bit, have the question that I noticed that when at the MCAC about the Cheyenne Village / McLaughlin Lodge, that at the end, it recorded the vote, but it never stated the final disposition of that decision. So it was 3-3, and that means that it was that the removal of it from the historic, the adjoining property, the removal of it from the historic district was not approved. And I don't see that stated anywhere.
Well, we're just recommending. I do believe, and I have tried to clarify this with Denise, that this still goes to council.
Oh, okay.
We just recommend, and we failed to recommend because we tied,
Right.
but I don't think it's over at all. And maybe
Right.
Austin, I mean, I was going to ask that a month ago and didn't. And I've tried to clarify that with Denise, but not gotten a totally clear answer. Do you know, Austin?
Yeah, and I think hopefully during the orientation today, a lot of this stuff hopefully will be more clear. But you're correct that in that matter, you had a recommendation authority, which means you can recommend to council to approve or deny the application. You recommended to deny because you didn't have a majority of your commission. And then the council needs to take that into consideration along with other applicable criteria, making their decision.
We made no recommendation, actually, Austin. The motion failed. The motion to approve the removal failed. And then we probably should have followed up with a motion to deny, and we didn't. But I think we just failed to provide a recommendation because no motion passed.
Right. And Karen, I see Denise is in with participants. I see a hand up there.
You do?
So maybe you can bring, I don't know,
Oh, yeah, let me bring her over. Yep,
go ahead and bring her over. Thanks.
okay, yep, there you
Yeah, I
go.
saw the nine count on participants and that she was with attendees and her hand is. And thank you, Austin, for clarifying that. And obviously it's going to be a bit of a road for that particular subject. So we'll probably end up revisiting it anyhow.
And Denise may have a different view totally.
2 things is I put my hand up because of the minutes, and I said you could go back and read those or watch the recording if you wanted to change those to be very specific. And then 2, this is going to the council. So it will be followed per the code, which means that it has to go to the work session first. And I think Austin is going to talk about it. And there's a very specific process. So we have that outlined for council and it's on their agenda accordingly. So the one, whether it's a motion, and Austin, I would need your legal advice regarding that, since the motion did not pass. I think that's how it would read, is that the motion happened and it did not pass, and then council will go from there.
Yeah, I agree. That is how it will play out in this scenario. But I also agree with you, Anne, that as a matter of process, we need to actually be making a recommendation to approve or deny or continue on every matter before the HPC. And so, yeah, so going forward, let's be sure that we do that. If a motion fails, then we need to put another motion forward to ensure that something passes. And if nothing passes, then we need to continue to get more information or, yeah, those are the three options actually.
So maybe we should have continued the discussion at another meeting. Yeah, I mean, I do think, as I thought about it after the fact, we probably should have had a motion to deny. My guess is, although I'm just guessing, that it would have also failed on a tie vote. But we didn't actually do that. So that leaves it a little bit gray.
And I'll have to look at the code provisions, but you do have a time bar to make recommendations. I'm guessing that that time bar has lapsed, which means that they will not take into consideration any recommendation or lack thereof, because you have a specified amount of time to be able to give that recommendation, whichever way it goes. And now we're going to be past that point. And so the council will have to take the issue up without your recommendation, which again, as a matter of process, we want to try to avoid as much as possible. So next time we get into this situation and we have a motion that fails on recommendation, we should try to keep going and keep discussing until we get a motion that passes.
Okay. There
That's
we
good
are.
to know. We could have been way into the night, though. Yeah, I mean, clearly, if we had 7 members, we wouldn't have this problem. So part of the issue is we don't have a fully staffed commission.
Right.
Because that's why you have 7 members, is so you don't end up tying. But when you have 6, and we had 6 because we had an alternate sitting in,
Yes, we did.
yeah, then you've got an issue. But good information, Austin. Thank you.
Even with 7, we could end up with just 6 people attending and voting on any one particular meeting. So you still have that challenge periodically.
Good, yeah.
Very well. So we've
Good.
definitely had a good review of our minutes from the February 2nd meeting. So
Doug, can I just ask a quick question?
certainly.
So Austin, are you saying that when the motion failed and we needed to make a recommendation to council, we would recommend to council that we were not recommending the land be taken out of the historic zone? Is that what we would have been doing after our vote?
Yeah, so you'd have 2 options as far as the recommendation goes. You either recommend approval or you recommend denial. So
Okay.
exactly, so it's got to fall into one of those buckets.
So we would do, okay, we don't have to keep doing it until we agree to something. Okay.
Well, no, he's saying we would have to keep doing it till we
Yeah.
agree to something. Because I think had we kept going and somebody had moved to deny the removal, that would have failed as well on a 3-3 vote. And then I think what Austin is saying, we should just keep talking to see if there's information that we've missed or if we can clarify in a way that would change somebody's mind. But we could have kept going for a very long time, I think.
But would it benefit if people were pretty entrenched in where they were standing and didn't want to take the land out or
Right.
recommend it? So, if the purpose is to change the minds, but if people's minds aren't going to be changed, it seems like to continue into the night wouldn't be productive for any of us.
And it might not have been, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It's
just
kind of
wanted
like a hung jury situation where, there's no final outcome. However, with something like that too, when there's a split with our body, we still could have voted on a motion to say the Historic Preservation Commission was unable to agree on a specific action, and therefore leaving this up to, we could have maybe gone that direction with it. Leaving this up to city council to clarify for us. So
it's not really a hung jury because we voted and the code said that if it was a tie, it failed.
right.
It failed, yeah. No, and I think anybody looking at what we did will
Would
come to the conclusion that we couldn't come to a conclusion.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I don't know.
Right,
if we
so
would-
we probably would have been in the same practical effect we are here, which is you probably would have been required to continue it if you couldn't get a motion passed that night. Then upon continuance, the same thing would have happened and you would be time barred. And so the
Okay.
council would have had to take up the issue without a recommendation.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Austin.
Yeah, of course.
Very good. So Do we have any more comments or input from our last meeting minutes? Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to approve the minutes from February 2nd, 2022, regular meeting HPC with corrections that have been discussed.
So that's a good motion, I think, because I think that raises an issue that maybe we haven't clarified, and Austin may be able to help us. I've always been under the impression that the chair does not make motions.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
that's what I thought too, Ann.
Me
Well, then the
too.
chair
I think
won't,
it-
the chair
here-
rescinds
And
his.
actually, Susan
his
already
motion.
had, so is that right? Didn't you make a
Yes,
motion?
I actually
Susan?
made that motion,
Yeah.
so I
Okay,
think, Doug, all we need is a second on my.
I'll
motion.
second
there
it.
you go.
Let's
I
put this
do
baby
believe I have a
down.
motion and a second on the
Done.
floor.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
I-
See, that was
Very
a
good.
good learning experience, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, very well then. I guess we move on to section 3, unfinished business. I don't believe we have anything underneath that category. No, we have no MCACs or anything like that hanging out there that I know of. Okay, we go into section 4, new business. And again, I'm asking, is this where we take any sort of public comments?
We don't,
We
Non-agenda
don't
items?
take public comment.
we're quasi judicial, so we don't take public comments.
We don't want to hear it from those guys.
We
right?
don't.
Well,
And
when
there's
there's
no-
applicant, and there's people wanting to talk when we're doing something, yes, we take the public, but not for
Right.
like they do at
Right.
council or.
No, that's right. But that does raise a question for me. When I looked at the posted material for the agenda, there's all this stuff from the log cabin on Shelton Road. But it's not on the agenda. What is that?
So,
I thought that was item 3 under other
Item
business.
3.
yes, that's item 3. And what I had done, basically,
Oh, okay.
we'll get to that later.
Okay.
But
okay,
I had received a couple of emails and I asked Dylan to put that on the agenda.
Okay.
So we
okay,
could have a discussion about not just the Shelton, but some of the other letters we've received. We can review that, see how we're going to handle it moving forward.
Okay.
Is it
got
fan mail?
That's, I tell you what, I'm glad my house is as far away from the road as it is. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, got it.
As long
Thank
as they're
you.
not death threats, that's all we care about.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, section 5, other business. I don't believe we have any other
Yeah.
business waiting in the wings for us.
Well, this
Okay,
is where item 2 comes in.
and this is where item 2 comes in, quasi judicial commission training with the city attorney. And that would be you, Austin.
That's me. All right. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to share a PowerPoint. Let's see if I can
Okay,
do
good.
Let's see, how do I? This one here. Are you guys seeing this historic preservation
Yes.
commission? Okay.
Yes.
sweet. All
Yes.
right, first one for Austin tonight. Okay, and so we can talk about any kind of legal issues you guys want to talk about, but I have this set agenda for us to cover some of the issues that are likely to come before the HPC, legal issues that are likely to come before the HPC. So I see this as like a high level, what I think is the absolute need to knows for being a commission member. And I go through each one of these things at a pretty high level, but I think if you get this takeaway, you're going to be good 99% of the time. And those other 1% of the times, it's probably just a tricky issue that you need to just contact Denise about, and then she'll forward it along to me and Jeff. So this is our agenda for today, but again, I'll have questions at the end, so we can talk about things like a general comment period if you guys want at the end. Okay, so I'd like to start with the purpose of the Historic Preservation Commission. This is taken from the city website, but it's derived from the code. So the Historic Preservation Commission reviews plans for buildings in the historic district for architectural appropriateness, and to assure that proposal meets the city's design guidelines, which are based on the Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation. The only reason I put this here is just because I think it's a good reminder of the general scope of the HPC. Now, what is the actual scope of the HPC? I think it falls into 3 buckets, and I'll talk about each in some detail. I think those 3 buckets are advisory, legislative, and quasi-judicial. This authority is derived from the municipal code. It's section 252010. And if I had to distill your authority into 3 main things, I would say that it's to make recommendations to city council on demolition and designation, to create an incentive program which can be codified by city council, and to review and approve material change of appearance certifications. I'm kind of going through these first slides quick, but after we get into like the meaty stuff, which starts here, I'm going to take a break after each slide and see if you guys have any questions. So general considerations, general legal considerations as an HPC member. The commission acts as a body, not as individuals. No single member has the authority to act on behalf of the city on their own. There's no authority to spend city funds unless the city council has expressly approved such fund expenditure. There's no authority to direct or supervise city staff. City staff works with the boards and commissions, but is not subject to their control. So any issues need to be addressed with the supervisor of the applicable employee. Any legal advice provided to the commission from myself or Jeff or anyone else at the firm is confidential and cannot be disclosed to third parties. On that note, I sent you guys a memorandum, or I think I sent you guys a memorandum, which talks in more detail about some of the issues that are going to be most common, some of the most common legal issues. Just if someone could raise their hand, did you actually receive that memo?
Yes.
Yes.
I
did.
Yeah.
did not see a memo.
You did not? Okay, I'll have Dylan resend it.
Okay.
But
Would
I'll
it,
reference,
would it come from your email or would it come from the city?
you'll almost never receive emails from me for reasons we'll get into in just a moment. You'll almost always receive them from staff. So I
It
think,
came from Dylan. It was in his email
Yeah.
with all the attachments for the
In our
meeting.
packet.
Yeah,
Okay.
And that, what Dylan sent us.
right.
so I'll be referencing that memo kind of tangentially throughout this presentation, but that's another example of something that's confidential and it should be, it shouldn't be disclosed to any third parties. It constitutes attorney-client privilege. There's no authority to bind the city legally, contractually. What that means is
Oops.
that you as individuals can't contract on behalf of the city. So is there a question in there?
Yeah, did I lose you guys? I have nothing but a blank screen in front of me now.
Uh-oh. Do you guys still see my presentation?
I can.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we can see you, Doug.
We
I
can see
do.
you, Doug.
I can't see it.
Yeah, there you are.
Yeah, I have a blank screen for whatever reason.
Wow.
Excuse me. Wow. Uh-oh.
Hmm.
We'll continue and I'll try to track as I can. I'm a good listener.
Okay, well, let me know if you want me to like, do you want me to try resharing? Do you think that'll help or no?
No, you can go ahead because you're reading line by line. I can track.
Okay,
Just a suggestion, could you forward the presentation to the members, Austin? Would that be okay? That way Doug could follow along in his
yeah, let
own.
me do that right now.
Well,
I'll
the problem being is my screen is blank. My screen just went blank.
Okay,
Yeah, I can't see anything at all. See, I'm touching this. I see nothing.
Your whole computer screen went blank.
Yeah, my whole computer screen.
Okay,
How old's your computer?
yeah.
Yeah. So I may rejoin you via phone.
okay.
Oh, we get to see you.
Karen, I just forwarded it along to you, the PowerPoint. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to cover as far as the general considerations. Any questions on this stuff? Good to go? Cool. Okay, so if there's one thing I want you to take away from this presentation, it's this bit about quasi-judicial. As I said, I would fit the duties and authority of the HPC into 3 buckets. So the first is quasi-judicial. This includes advisory decisions, i.e. it includes when you make recommendations on an application. That's considered a quasi-judicial action. A quasi judicial action is a discrete act relating to a single item. So think approving an NCAC. Whenever there's quasi judicial decisions being made, due process is triggered under the US Constitution and also the Constitution of Colorado. I think of due process as requiring three things: proper notice, a fair hearing, and a neutral decision maker. So we need all three of those things to be able to make a legally binding quasi judicial decision. Generally, when you're making a quasi-judicial decision, you're applying the criteria to evidence presented at that public hearing. The criteria in the code to the evidence you're hearing at that public hearing. You must be fair and impartial, not engage in ex parte communications. That means communications outside of the public hearing that could influence your decision on the matter. And you shouldn't be biased. Decisions of a quasi-judicial nature, once they've exhausted their administrative remedies, meaning once you've gone through the appeal process available in Manitou, they're subject to judicial review, meaning they can eventually end up in district court for the applicable jurisdiction. Compare that to a legislative decision like creating an incentive program. Those are generally applicable public policy actions. Those don't have specific criteria, and none of the requirements I just stated apply. The basic legal requirement is that you shouldn't commit fraud. So when we look at the different bars of a quasi-judicial decision versus legislative, it's very different. And you can see why we're very careful about quasi-judicial decisions, because they have a big legal effect and can get us into trouble if we're not careful. And then the last bucket is just what I would call administrative. And that means that as HPC members, you represent the city in all of your activities. You don't get to take off that hat, and you should still not engage in fraud in that manner. Okay, I know that's kind of a lot of jargon. Any questions on these three buckets or quasi-judicial decisions? Yeah, Anne.
Yeah, my question is regarding, I mean, MCACs I think are really clear quasi-judicial. But what about when we make a decision to either expand or contract a historic district, like the one on McLaughlin Lodge or one that's upcoming on Hiawatha Gardens? Are those also quasi-judicial?
They are, and I'll tell you why, because they still apply to a discrete act. And if it ever gets appealed to a judicial court, if it ever gets appealed in a district court, your record, all of your minutes, the decision you made, any other influence is all a part of that record. And it can be used potentially against the city if we weren't following these rules. So it is considered a quasi-judicial decision, even when you're just making a recommendation to council. And it's important we keep all of these legal requirements in mind, even for those decisions. It's a great question.
Right. And that would also apply to demolitions, which are just recommendations, but still based on specific criteria.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this stuff? Good to go. Cool. Okay, let's talk about open records. So open records are governed by the Colorado Open Records Act, which is commonly called CORA. Under CORA, public records must be open to public inspection. Just 1 second, the siren's going by. All right, we're good to go. Public records includes all writings made, maintained, or kept by a public body. So CORA is very, very broad. The one exception to CORA is work product. And if you're familiar with the legal doctrine of work product, it's completely different under CORA. So even though CORA uses the same terminology, it's not referring to that general legal product or legal work product doctrine. CORA is just referring to communication for the purpose of assisting elected officials in reaching a decision within the scope of their authority. That's the only exception we really have to work under. So what that means is if a commission member has a question for staff, say you email Karen and say, Karen, I really don't understand this criteria. Do we have an interpretation for it? I think we could get that under work product and not be subject to CORA. But generally, all your communications made will be subject to CORA, which means they could become public record. Any questions on CORA? Great. Oh, yeah.
Karen, can you bring Doug back into the public meeting? He just called. So if you could bring him back in, that would be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna,
And I had a question about the previous slide. Could I ask a quick
Sure.
question?
sure,
The-
yeah.
The ex parte communications, does that start only when the application has been submitted, or does that start when you know it's going to be coming to this body?
That is a great question. It's the latter. And in that latter case, you also could get into prejudgment issues, which I discussed in greater detail in the memo. And so you want to be careful if there's even a possibility that the application hasn't reached finality and you might be able to hear it again on record, then you do not want to engage in any ex parte communications or begin prejudging it. Say, man, if we get that appeal, it's definitely going to be a denial or something like that. You want to make sure you avoid those kind of conversations.
Even if it's a public meeting or anything like that?
I'm not sure I'm following.
So if you know that something is going to be coming to the HPC or Planning Commission or whatever it may be, but there's public meetings being held for that, should you attend those public meetings or should you not?
I generally recommend that you do not. If you do, you need to be really careful of engaging in really any communication with folks that could be decision makers, or if you yourself are a decision maker, then you should avoid that meeting. And if you go to the meeting, avoid all conversation that could start talking about the subject matter of something that you might hear.
Or any comment that you may make, right? You should not make any comment.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Thank
And-
you.
And by a comment, could that be like someone saying, wow, what a great application we have? That would be making a comment if you're praising an applicant and the application, right?
Yeah, I would prefer that you don't make those comments. And I'd prefer, and this is kind of the intent of the open meetings law, which we'll get to later, is that all of that should be on the record. We should be able to point to specifically on the record where all of your comments on any sort of application decision are. And the only way you can really ensure that is if it's at the meeting, it's at the hearing. And so it's all kind of a part of that general rule, as if has anything to do with a quasi-judicial decision, then we want to make sure that you hold off on all of those comments or anything you have to say about it until we are actually at that meeting, at the hearing, and we can get it on record.
Okay.
Yeah, so the specific issue, I think currently, Austin, and I'm sure this is what Denise was referring to, is we know that at some point, we're going to be asked to make a decision on an addition to a historic library, our historic library.
Mhm.
And there have been a year and a half of meetings, public meetings, at Zoom, in person occasionally, about that topic with varying levels of detail. I mean, starting just conceptual, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the question is, and it's a good one, when we know that something like that is eventually going to end up in front of us, should we not be participating in any way, shape, or form in those public meetings?
My preference is yes, because if you do go there, then you can't talk about the merits of the issue at all. If you want to go and just sit there like a statue, then I guess that's fine. But my preference is that you don't do it, because even if you go, then there's still a prejudgment issue of, are you showing up because you're in favor of it? Are you showing up because you're not in favor of it? And people can start making those arguments. The easiest way to say that those arguments are not valid is saying that they don't apply. They weren't there. There's no way they could have prejudged. There's no way they could have violated the open meetings law.
So I've got to go ahead and ask a couple of questions here, because I got booted. I was able to listen to everything you were saying, Austin, and but I was unable to comment on the section before this. So, and I'm just going to straight outright say this: I have attended several meetings, public engagement meetings, dealing with the Manitou Springs Library, have made some comments, things of that nature. So at this point, as much as I am passionate about the subject, it sounds like in order for me to be objective or to be fair, that I will probably have to recuse myself from any decision that's made about that.
Let's circle back to that one, actually. I don't want to answer that yet because I'm going to talk about it at a later slide. And I'm not sure I know enough about your engagement to be able to make that decision today. But can I circle back
Well,
to that at the end
but
of
I need for you to clarify a couple things, because you said day-to-day activities representing the everyday act, so on and so forth, that, you know, I'm always a commissioner, once a commissioner, always a commissioner kind of thing.
Right.
You know, I do limit my conversations when I'm out and about in public about, you know, things that I do know that are coming up. You know, of course, I have private conversations with my wife. That's sort of, you know, in the house here. But you know, so here's a question for you. Let's say recently we heard discussions about the McLaughlin Lodge / Cheyenne Village. Now that that's past our table, now that's passes, am I able to have conversations about that with individuals in the public, or should I just sway from that?
So I would say two things. One, you shouldn't have any conversation if the matter isn't reached finality with at least the local government. So if it's still up for decision at the council level, then I'd prefer that you don't have any conversations until it's reached its finality. It can no longer be appealed, what have you. The second thing I'd say is I think you are free to engage in those discussions once it's reached finality, but I would caution that it's still possible that those folks could use that in a judicial action against the city if it came to that. Hopefully it never would. But
Okay.
As far as protecting the city in the best way possible, my advice, of course, would be like, don't talk about it unless you're under hearing. But I understand that that's not really feasible, and it's not feasible in a city like Manitou all the time. And so it's a balance is really the answer. And I know that's never a fun answer, but I do think it's a balance. I think you've got to use your judgment. I don't think it would be wise to say, yeah, I think that was the wrong decision. And by the way, I don't think they met the criteria, because then that person could use you, subpoena you, get you under oath, and have
Right.
you
Yeah.
be a witness against the city. And that's something we want to avoid. Did that kind of answer your question? Or
It does. And also, so there's no me taking off that hat, going to a meeting as a concerned private citizen and
That's right.
participating and turning back around and sitting on this. So, well, I'm going to have to make a decision on certain subjects that are coming up for the HPC then.
Yeah, maybe I'm going to address that in the end. So maybe it will come a little bit more clear. And then if
No, it's clear enough. I understand. I
Okay.
do. You can just go ahead and continue. I understand Cora too.
I have a quick question. Austin, what does it look like when we recuse ourselves when we're on a Zoom meeting? What do we do when we're recusing on a Zoom?
That's a great question. And I will get to that actually, if I can punt on it for now, if that's okay.
Okay, that's okay.
Cool. All right, thank you guys. Great questions. We're good on Cora. Okay, open meetings. So we kind of jumped ahead on this one. Governed by the Colorado Open Meetings Law. The Open Meetings Law essentially is a notice requirement. It essentially requires that any meeting of a quorum, so 3 or more members, may only be held after at least 24-hour notice and must be open to the public. Adding new agenda items with less than 24-hour notice could violate the Colorado Open Meetings Law. If there's ever a situation where you think that you really need to adjust the agenda with less than 24 hours, contact Denise, she'll contact us, and we'll try to work through it. There's limited exceptions that we might be able to get you guys under. But generally, that's the rule, notice requirement. And the thing that I would caution on is emails. And my word to the wise is that do not reply all, because emails are could be considered a meeting. So if you're replying all, there's more than 3 of you in that chain, then you just had a meeting. And that discussion probably violated the Colorado Open Meetings Law. Okay, any questions on that? I know we kind of already talked about this, but anything else? Cool, feeling good on that one. Okay, there's only a couple more, so I won't be too much longer. So conflicts of interest in Colorado is insanely complicated. you can see all of the laws that govern conflicts of interest in Colorado and then in Manitou specifically. I'll boil that all down to this. Generally, you cannot perform an act affecting your economic interest or your family members' economic interest. So to avoid a conflict of interest, always disclose the interest. Even if you think, oh, I'm not really sure, this might be, this might not be, disclose it, get it on the record. Second, if it's decided, if HPC members decide or the individual itself decide that this is definitely a violation of the conflict of interest laws, then you must recuse yourself and you must leave the room, which means if you're on a Zoom, you must leave the meeting. And then you can, staff liaison can shoot you an email, or I can shoot you an email and say, hey, we're done with that part of the discussion, you can come on back. And you can come back on the Zoom meeting, or obviously if we're in person, you just go grab that person, bring them back into the meeting. And then of course, you can't influence the decision in any matter. So you can't say, even though I'm recusing myself, I definitely would have voted this way, or something like that. Does that all make sense?
Mhm.
Any questions there? Cool. Okay, this is my last slide, and then we can talk about other issues lingering out there. And this kind of goes back to how we started with the scope of authority. So kind of tying it all back together, coming back to where we started. So boards and members, CPC members, or HPC members, excuse me, have immunity under the Colorado Governmental Immunity Act, unless they act willfully and wantonly, or the act is outside the scope of authority. So the takeaway here is don't seek vengeance against someone in making a decision, and make sure that you're always acting within the scope of authority, which I detail in the memo. Okay, so that's actually everything. So let's circle back to kind of anything I missed or any one-offs. Doug, how are you feeling? Did I kind of somewhat adequately address your question, or do you want to talk about it more?
No, you've addressed it. And I mean, I was aware to a certain degree of, what behaviors outside of the commission should look like except for, I thought that it was acceptable for me to act as a private citizen and join in group discussions and in panels that dealt with the issues that are, before the city. And I mean, unfortunately, Manitou Springs is such a small community that when we have things like the library come up, McLaughlin Lodge, which is in the Keithley Cabin Historic District, the namesake of my great grandfather, Hiawatha Gardens, all these things that are, this is my town, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I want to be involved. And quite frankly, what I'm weighing right now in the back of my mind, and I'm going to be very frank with you, is I'm looking at my term coming up at the end of this month. And I'm thinking, I have to take into consideration, is my influence in my participation as a citizen more valuable than it is a commissioner?
Right.
So there's a very good possibility. I need to think about that. I might sleep on it, and I might be sending out an email tomorrow. We'll have to see.
Mm.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for your honesty and your questions. Any other questions? Any other things I didn't cover that you guys want to talk about? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at your memo, and I know that's confidential, but so I'll try to be a little careful here. But your description of conflict of interest in that memo goes beyond just financial.
It does. It's very rare that in practice there would be considered a conflict of interest if it's not financial. And so that's kind of my high level takeaway. There's circumstances where it can be considered a conflict of interest if it's not a financial gain, but it's exceedingly rare. I've never ever seen it. I don't even know if there's ever been a case in Colorado that has proven that. So it's something to keep in mind, something to keep in like your back pocket. And that's kind of always comes back to the always disclose, get it out there, say whatever the interest is. And then we'll have a discussion and see if it actually is a true conflict of interest under the law. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, it helps. And you're pretty clear, and that's what I've heard in other boards. that you represent the city, not the board members. So you're not going to advise us about conflicts of interest. But I was a little taken aback by the notion that not only would we disclose the potential conflict of interest, but discuss it as a body. I don't know that I've ever seen that done.
Yeah, I think it is a bit strange. That's what the statute requires. That's what state law requires, is that you disclose the actual interest. And the way that we read that, at least, is that you must state what the interest is. It's hard to know what the disclosure is if you just say, I have a conflict, because it's this delicate balance where you're not supposed to abstain unless you have an actual conflict. And so it's kind of like a catch-22, and that you can't actually know if you have a conflict without actually stating it, actually disclosing it, getting it on the record, and then having the commission decide whether it meets the legal standard, or the city attorney decide if it meets the legal standard.
Does the commission then, if you have someone, they say they don't have it, and then a commission member thinks they do you vote? Do you go to the city, you vote, whether it is or not? As a body, we vote?
Yep, and it's a majority vote. So if a majority votes that it is an actual conflict under the law, then they must recuse themselves.
Yeah, that's
I think
what-
it's,
that's
I think
what's
it's
kind of
fairly obvious
unusual.
that a conflict of interest would be considered economic gain, particularly for yourself or a family member, that any decision that you make would enhance some sort of economic or financial gain, whether it be real monies or property or influence on a property sale that may benefit them, things of that nature. I mean, this is law 101. This stuff
That's,
is.
yeah, I agree that that's clear. I think what's not clear is that if you read the memo, it's broader than that. It talks about associational ties, personal interest. And I
Yeah.
think that's where there's not a bright line. Clearly, if you're a principal in a business that's going to make a contract with whatever, that's a conflict of interest. But I think it gets less clear when you're talking about personal interest, associational ties,
Right.
etc.
And I would
You
just say my opinion is that the law was written for small towns, and that they really don't see that. I don't think the state sees that as a conflict, hardly ever. It has to be so severe that you are so biased in your decision making, you can't put it aside. That your brother's the applicant, you talk with him about it every day. And even though you won't gain financially from it, you just can't unwind that you don't want your brother to fail or what have you. That's going to be enough to be a conflict. But it's so rare. And even in the cases I've seen where family members are involved, there's no economic interest, I've seen it be not a conflict. And the only times I have seen it be a conflict is when it involves some sort of economic interest. Again, the memo's a lot broader. It covers all of our bases. It's making sure we're really thorough. I'd say 9 times out of 10, if you follow this rule, you're going to be okay. And that other time, let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation with Denise, and Denise will bring us in if necessary.
Got it. Yeah, thank you, Austin. That helps.
Yeah, of course, this is
Thank
tricky
you.
stuff. So
And I got to add that obviously family members involving other family members definitely goes way to the state. I mean, look at the Como brothers. I mean, Homo brothers. I mean, federal level, it's everywhere. This is the epitome of corruption. Basically, it's the crux. So,
right.
Very good.
Okay.
Austin, I have a question.
Yeah.
You had a slide in here on executive sessions and you didn't address that.
Oh my gosh, you're totally right. I skipped right by it. I got too excited.
'Cause I didn't know that we, as a commission, would be able to have executive sessions. I know elected officials do in their public meetings, but I didn't know we would.
So you are able to hold an executive session. The law is actually the Colorado Open Meetings Law, and it's an exception to the Colorado Open Meetings Law. And so you're governed by that open meetings law, and you get to come under the exception as well. I heard from my orientation with the CPC that it's extremely rare that Manatee does this ever. And so that was something I didn't know going into this because I have other clients that do it all the time. But it's an exception to the general rule that meetings must be open to the public. If you do want an executive session, you must state the authority under the CRS. It's extremely particular. So my preference is if you know you're going to be talking to an issue where you're or going through an issue where you think you're going to need legal advice, then let Denise know and she'll let us know. And I will be able to prep for that in advance. And I typically give my chairs a script to follow, and they just read straight from the script to make sure that we cover our bases. But I'm sorry, I skipped that. Thank you for pointing that out.
Okay, I'm familiar with the structure of executive sessions. I just didn't think we would qualify for that. I'm not sure how we would initiate that because we don't even see the packet and the topics until, after it's sent out to the public. So I don't know how you would add an executive session to that.
So typically how I've seen it work in practice is that there's some big issue coming down the pipe that's going to be extremely controversial, and there's a lot of legal issues involved. And to be able to make sure that the commission members are on the same page, they request an executive session, and to put that right into the agenda. We are going to, we reserve the right to have an executive session on all matters for legal purposes or whatever purpose it might be. And then we can kind of prep beforehand. Sometimes you don't have that luxury. And sometimes you're in the middle of a hearing and you say, I have a legal question I need to ask our city attorney, and it's confidential. And so I need to be able to call an executive session. If that's the case, it's just going to take me a couple of minutes to prep the script, send it over to the chair, and make sure we're all on the same page, but we can still make it work.
Okay, thank you.
And Austin, usually from a city perspective, if somebody's wanting to go into executive session, we always reach out to our attorney to make sure it qualifies. And then they write the verbiage. So it may be staff saying we need to discuss this, so the staff will lead it, or the chair will say we need to do it. And then we send it to our attorneys and they decide whether that qualifies for executive session or not.
Okay.
Good point.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions on this stuff?
Can I ask a question, Austin?
Sure.
One of the things that has been discussed in the past and continues to be discussed, and we talked about, I know in the Planning Commission, is site visits.
Right.
And as we said, I think Hiawatha is coming up, the library is coming up. There are some very big projects coming up. I know Cheyenne Village came up and there was the request for site visits, those things. Can you give us your perspective, and if that was to happen, how we would do it, et cetera, because that is, I know when we've looked at it before, it's a very, we want to make sure that we follow everything to the T with site visits.
Right, so I think there's a couple of things going on. One, your SOPs, your standard operating procedures, actually, I think require you to do site visits, which I found highly unusual. I know staff is that not correct?
They used to require, that is now out of
Okay.
the code. So it used to require it, now it's out of the code and it does not require it.
Okay, great. So this is what I'll say about site visits. I think if you want to do it individually, that's totally fine. You have the same authority you would as a typical citizen, meaning you can't, barge in there and say, I'm such and such person and I demand you open the building for me or something. You've got to do it as a typical citizen. And so, if there's like construction and there's a fence around it, don't trespass to the property to see what's going on inside that fence. And the second thing I'll say is that be careful of the open meetings law. And I would require, or not require, but ask that you do it individually and not as groups, like not as field trips. If you are going as a quorum, even if it's accidental, that's a violation of the open meetings law. And we would have had to notice that. And you're talking about a subject to which is going to come before you. So it's a violation of the open meetings law. So you want to be careful of that. So those are the two things I would say, is that you don't have any additional authority to like seek access. And the second thing is that we want to be careful of the open meetings law. Just go individually if you're going to go.
And so Austin, and this is around prejudgment, if you go and you're looking at the building or you're looking around, it isn't wise for us then to have conversations with the applicant who might be at the site and talk
Right.
and listen to his evidence or to listen what he's saying, because then we would be starting to prejudge because we'd be getting information not in a public meeting. So that shouldn't happen. We should just be observers and be looking, not having conversations with the owner of whatever it is we're looking at.
Right, that is a very good point, and I'm definitely missed that one. So thank you for bringing that up. It's a very good point.
I also feel though that at least one commissioner should be in the ordinance or code that at least one commissioner make a site visit without engaging the applicants. You know, as a contractor, I won't bid on a job or talk about a job sight unseen. You know, you can't make a decision on a building or on windows or other elements dealing with a historic structure if you haven't even seen it, if you're totally unfamiliar with it. So, I mean, I understand the opens meeting law. You don't want to go as a quorum. You don't want to, and you don't want to be influenced by the applicants, you know, but you can't just make a decision on something you've never seen. I mean, that's a bit silly. Drawings and particularly renditions do not do justice to what is pre-existing, and what they're talking about, how it's going to be as part of the lot, how it's going to lay with the rest of the buildings, how it's going to reflect the neighborhood. You know, the addition or other things of that nature may be disruptive to a neighborhood's continuity, and that's not seen in drawings or in platting. Or footprints that you get normally from, you know, what we get, which are renderings that are to be reviewed by a planning commission, by the Pikes Peak Regional Building Department. They're not that extensive.
But we
Yeah,
do
and-
that. We go on site visits, Doug.
We do.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
I don't think we need it in the code, because I think then you have to decide which person is going to do it and when they can do it, and it starts to become cumbersome. I mean, I go to all the sites because I want to see the windows, I want to see the doors, I want to see where it is, but I think we all do, because
I think that's the expectation, actually.
Yeah, the
is-
expectation,
Is that we
right.
individually view each of the actions in front of us prior to having the meeting. And that is, as I agree with Doug, that's necessary because you need to understand the circumstances. But there's nobody else there. You don't engage with anybody.
right.
You're just, as Austin said, as any person could, you're just driving by or walking by and looking at the environment.
I do know that's what planning commission, they expect everybody on the commission to go and see this site, but to do it individually. I know that's their expectation as planning commission.
Good to know.
Yeah, that was a big one. Thank you for bringing that up. Anything else I missed, Denise, that I should talk about? Okay.
Not that I can think of. I'm sure there'll be more, but not as at this point. I think it's really, I know one of the things that we're working on is making sure that you'd never discuss anything in any detail that's not on the agenda. And it can be challenging at times, but I would encourage lest, you know, as we're working on with the city council, is doing a point of order, you can add something to the agenda, but you can't discuss it. And that's really important.
So Austin, do you want to stick around to the end of the meeting? Because the next item 3 we're getting ready to go into sort of is a bit broad. I asked Dylan to word it that way. Maybe hear some of the things we're discussing and see if it's a matter of overreach, or if there's anything that's being discussed that may be out of line or anything of that nature.
Yeah, I would love to. And I did actually prepare some notes. So I can, do we want to get to that now? If you want to open that item, I have maybe a couple things I would even just kind of
Okay.
frame the conversation in, if that's okay.
Okay, well, let's, I'm going to go ahead and take the test of water here to all the commissioners. And are we comfortable with the discussion and the tutorial we've had from Austin this evening? Are we ready to move on, or is there any other questions?
I'm ready to move on. It's been very thorough and the memo was very clear, and I kept reading it over and over.
Very
Thank
good.
you, Austin.
Probably a first for anything I've written, so.
Yeah.
And Karen, you can take me off since I will not be part of the rest of the meeting.
I think
Okay.
you just leave the meeting, Denise.
You've been a good lawyer,
Karen,
Austin.
I don't,
Thanks.
Karen, I don't want to leave the meeting. I just want to be a participant. So you should be
Oh,
able to
okay.
move me off because
Yep.
I'll stay for the meeting, but I won't be a
Okay.
participant.
Yeah, I
Well,
can do
well,
that.
Denise, keep an ear out because some of this stuff is, things that we, or I think should possibly be added to ordinance, or we'll see how it goes. Anyhow, moving into item number 3, discussion regarding non-compliance with MCAC approvals. I'm going to start out by saying that I did personally email Dylan Becker to add this item for certain things that are not a mystery to you, as the rest of the commissioners have received some of the letters concerning material change of appearance and things that have happened after we have approved them. Specifically, one, start off with a letter received from a resident at 240 Shelton Avenue, I think is Chuck Smith's address, Mr. Smith's address, regarding a material change of appearance we did for John McGee, builder of the 204 Shelton address. I might have my addresses wrong, but as you may know, we approved an exterior of half peeled logs with chinking in between to match the integrity of the neighborhood. And then I'd been this is my neighborhood, kind of keeping an eye on the build and all that kind of stuff, just out of curiosity, of course. And then we received this letter from Mr. Smith that now former planner Michelle Anthony had administratively approved the use of a different type material in the entire exterior of the building. And the complaint being from Mr. Smith was, it wasn't his personal taste, and I'm going to speak frankly. So please listen to me. I personally would have probably approved the change of material because it is log-like, it is in keeping with other buildings that are in the historic district. But it was the entire exterior of the building that was administratively approved without it coming back to the commission. I thought that was a bit of an overreach. Personally, I think that a decision that large should have come back before the commission. It wasn't just, hey, look, I can't find this craftsman style door. I'm trying to find something different. These 3 lights don't match. I can't find them anymore. I need different lights. This is an entire exterior of a building. And I think that in the future, as we had discussed about the new ordinances that are coming in, that out of diligence for future commissions and commissioners, that there should be some mention in an ordinance that if you're looking at such a large change for material change of appearance that's already been approved by the commission, that it should be reheard by them before an administrative decision can be made. Go ahead, Ann.
Well, maybe Austin, he said he wanted to kind of
Yeah.
Go ahead,
frame
Austin.
the issue anyway, so
Yeah.
why don't we let him go first?
Go for it.
Sweet, thank you. So I think I brought myself up to speed on what's going on here. Here's how I see what happened under the code. So you guys made the MCAC with conditions on it, it's completely good with the code. The applicant then went to Michelle to ask for administrative approval of the siding, just like Doug was saying. She's decided to do so under 1704-050 A3E, which allows for minor amendments to a previously approved MCAC. The language is very broad. And here's what I'll say. I think if I was you guys, I would be frustrated too. And we've talked with staff has talked to us rather, and they want to change this. And I'm currently working on an ordinance that will change this and prevent this issue from happening again. That will go before council. I can't promise you exactly what will happen. I can't promise you that council will approve it or anything like that, or what the exact language will be. But that's the intent of staff, is to have this changed so this can't happen again, and to really clarify that language. And basically there's two options we're exploring. One is to get rid of that minor amendment process altogether, so that there can be no admin approval of a previously approved MCAC. The other is to really specify what we mean by minor amendment approval. So I just wanted to get out ahead to say those couple of things just to kind of frame the conversation, but I totally understand the frustration. I understand the frustration of the neighbor. With that being said, unfortunately, this decision has reached finality. There's no other options available to any future appellant. The appeal period was 10 days, that's well past. So there is no process available to any future appellant to undo that administrative decision. It's done. I'm sorry, that's just the way the code operates today. But hopefully we can get an ordinance passed to address this going forward. Like I said, we are already working on it. Okay, that's all I wanted to say.
I
Off
think
soapbox.
So
go ahead.
Joy, yeah.
Go ahead, Ann.
What the point I'd like to make, I guess, is that if you look at what we approved, the item number 3, that citing that appears to be true log with chinking, is extraordinarily broad. Now, I know that we had probably pictures of what Mr. McGee was suggesting he was going to use, but the verbiage in the approval, and I suspect, I don't know that the pictures would be part of the discussion, is extremely broad. And I think, as Doug said, would have probably allowed that change. I do agree that maybe one of the remedies is to make everything come back to us if we've already approved it, and not allow administrative changes, no matter how quote unquote minor. But I think other than us writing the conditions a lot tighter than we generally write the conditions, this is going to happen again unless we eliminate administrative approvals.
And it's frustrating, Ann, I agree with you. And when the neighbors or people come back and say why have the HPC? Because obviously things are happening, you approve things and then they're done. I think that would really help us. It's also frustrating when we approve certain windows and then somehow the windows that go in aren't the windows that we approve. It just is like there's like this gray area where people say, oh, well, I'm going to do it a different way.
Yeah, I don't think that one's very gray.
Follow up.
That's a
Right.
whole different
That's,
issue.
yeah, I don't
We
think that's
shouldn't
gray
address.
at all.
Well,
This one I
gray,
think
but I mean,
is.
gray with
Yeah.
what happens because they put the windows in, do we make them take it out, or it's frustrating, and especially on this one, I think. I agree
so
with that.
I will have to state, without reviewing the MCAC in question, that I can say, particularly when it comes to log buildings, that it was very specific on what they call half-round logs, half-round peeled logs that was part of our MCAC. And again, what Austin was coming from, he read the ordinance, he read this, what Michelle approved out of, but even in its own language, it said minor adjustments. I don't consider the entire exterior of a period building a minor decision. Again, I mean, I pointed out my point, a door, maybe a window or two, or some lights, or something of that nature. I can't find these double hung sash or things exactly like this. That's on the minor side. The entire exterior of a building is not. There is a big difference between home style logs and half round logs.
Yeah, and
Big difference.
it doesn't say half round logs. That's the problem, Doug.
Well, I
It-
thought it had.
No,
I
it's-
was under the impression that it did.
What's in our agenda on page 9 says citing that appears to be quote unquote true log with chinking.
So
That's all
what
it says.
that's what it said.
Yeah, that's,
Okay.
if Dylan got this right, I mean, he's obviously taken this out of our,
Well, and in Austin, again, Austin pointed out, I mean, for me, it's not to argue. I mean, the quote unquote damage has been done. I feel that what he did looks fine. It's going to be okay. You know, I live next door to Mr. Smith. His wheel is always a little squeaky, and that's okay. It's
Well,
good to have a.
I would want us not to be talking about the neighbors or talking about
Oh,
somebody.
okay.
sneaky
Well,
or someone doing that. I don't think this is, he has no chance to speak back. or
Right.
himself.
Well, where I'm going with this is
Uncomfortable.
that I
I'm
think
uncomfortable
Austin
with
has
that.
made the point that I do feel that this ordinance should be revisited and maybe something more specific in its language, you know, when it comes to minor versus major. You know, I mean, again, I mean, Joy, we are this, there is this quasi judicial body that is, you know, has this whole process behind it. And so we come in, we make a decision, or we approve something, and then boom, it just gets changed without
I
any
think
sort of
that's what they're
question.
working on. I think I agree with Ann about, it just shouldn't have minor, because you know, a door is minor to someone, but it's a major thing because they look at it.
Right.
Or a window is minor to someone, but the neighbor next door gets to look at it all the time. So, you know, I think it's hard to say what minor is or not. If there's going to be changes and we spent all this time discussing and learning and site visiting, then we should be involved
Right,
with
Yeah.
any changes. I agree with that, definitely.
right.
It
And
would
that,
just
and that
protect
can
both
be,
us and the staff, really, quite frankly, if he makes this adjustment. It works to both, the benefit of both groups, us and the staff, so they're clear about what they can and can't do, and we're clear about where
Yeah.
the decision rests.
yeah, and that's, again, that's for the commissioners, the future commissioners, those who might be in this body in the future, and for the public at large, so that way they know that decisions that come here are final and what the results of those may be, because you know, it sort of undermines the authority of this commission for someone to be able just to ask for an administrative change anyhow. And then into the next segue and into the next part of the conversation I wanted to bring up, we did approve windows for 2 Deer Path, and so on and so forth, where we were very specific in the MCAC stating that you are not to remove the windows in this cottage. They are multi-light, old historic windows. And Ann had said this, we were very kind and worked with them to say, go ahead and change out all the windows in the rest of the building, and those that can be done. So that way there's this consistency, there's this continuity, which is important in a structure. I mean, when I discuss a project with a client, and I say, look, you want everything to look the same and everything needs to flow correctly. And, but we specifically said, do not change out these windows. And they just went behind everybody's back and did it anyhow. I feel that there needs to be some sort of consequences to that. Let it be fines or a lien or something of that nature. I mean, you know, having code compliance, have code going out, writing them a ticket and saying, here you go, slap on the wrist, you know, I mean, I think there needs to be a little bit more teeth to something like that. And I just think that it's just food for thought. You know, we can't make a decision, just have people say, well, you know, just flip it and say, I'll do whatever I want. And they're not to be consequences to that.
Well, and I think some of the consequences could be, if, as we look at this, that they need to come before the commission and explain what happened, just so that we understand, you know, why they did that.
Accountability.
Yeah, there has to be some kind of accountability for when that happens. You know, was there an earthquake and it destroyed them, or was it just your preference, you wanted something different?
Yeah. Yeah, and at the end of the day, they just went on the cheap and, you know, bought the $300 window instead of even trying to have the old windows replicated.
So I think you've raised a good question for Austin is, are there consequences in our code for ignoring an
Can we make them
action?
put up a bond knowing that then they have the money to be able to do the whole project?
So the HPC regulations specifically have their own enforcement and penalty regulations. That's what I'm looking at right now. I actually find them to be pretty strong. I mean, one of the remedies available is that you can have no building or use permit be issued for the development of the subject property in violation for a 10-year period.
That's for demolition.
That's pretty significant, yeah, for any demolition.
Right.
And so there's quite a few.
Which we've gotten to enact once.
We did, yes, yes.
on
There's
Midland.
there's quite a few available. I haven't spent enough time to give you a super clear answer, but there are quite a few enforcement remedies available to the HPC or to a violation of the HPC ordinance.
My question then, Austin, because I'm apparently not familiar enough with this, who is responsible for enforcing those then?
So it would be code enforcement with the city, but typically how that works is that someone contacts the city, the neighbor contacts and says, hey, this isn't in line with their building permit or whatever approval they got. I think this is a code violation. Then typically someone will come out and denote whether it's a code violation. If it is, then they come back and typically write a report and then recommend remedies. And they can do whatever remedies are available according to the code. And so it would be that would be a code enforcement issue when it come before the HPC and you guys get to decide and adjudicate that matter of what kind of penalty you want to assess. But it would be whatever penalty is available under this section of the code, which is 1704-120.
Should there be more of a standardized inspection that happens after a project is done on a standard operating procedure so that it's not up to the neighbors to say, oh gosh, this doesn't look like it was done right, or to us to go back and know when to go and see whether our direction was followed? Is there a process where staff goes out automatically and inspects when the project is done or during the project?
Not really, kind of. The answer is, well, it depends, which is the classic legal answer. But it would depend on whether there's a certificate of occupancy required after the approval they got. If there is, then they need to check all the boxes for all prior approvals, including an MCAC. But if they've already gone through that process and are changing something minor that wouldn't require a later approval, then there is no hook at the end to bring them back in for that checklist. And so I think in those cases, I had to think on it some more. I'm trying to think if I
Karen,
can think any examples.
Karen, can you bring Denise back over? She's asking to be brought back over. But, and thank you, Austin. That's news to me. I didn't, and again, we had, when this issue first happened, it was one of the first MCACs I heard as a new commissioner. And to answer your question, Susan, it wasn't done all at the same time. They waited almost a year and then just one day removed the windows and put these new slider ones exactly like they weren't supposed to put in. And then I had brought that to the attention, and I just don't know what I just disappeared into code compliance. Again, as far as what the replication or what the repercussions and consequences of this may be, if there's a fine in place or anything, I'm not aware of that structure, what that might look like, but that's in their lap now. It's not ours. I brought it to their attention because I noticed it, because it was by my request for that MCAC that those windows be preserved, because they were such an integral part of that cottage look. It was a classic Manitou cottage. So what can you do? Hi, Denise.
Hi, couple of quick things regarding the ordinance that Austin is putting together. We would bring it back to you for your feedback before we take it to council. So it's not just going to go to council without you guys looking at it and making your recommendation. Two is, Susan, we don't have the staffing to go out and look at every single one, right? That's not something that we have. However, we will, as you guys look at it, Dylan, the HPC person, can always go out, and that's one of the things that we're looking at, is doing site visits for planning and for these things. But if somebody brings it to our attention, we definitely do have some teeth in it. I don't think we've always practiced that. I think our new code enforcement person is very, believes in holding everybody accountable and doing that accordingly. So the culture is changing a little bit. as we move forward. So if you notice something, you can always bring it to our attention, and we'll definitely take action and go visit and can provide an update on it. But we don't have the staff to go and look at every single thing that is happening. The other thing regarding the ordinance to consider is if every change has to come back to you, remember you only meet monthly, and that can be very challenging. So that's just something to consider as you're writing this ordinance, to hamstring that every decision or everything that has to come back, that can really delay somebody who's working on something and needed to make a change for some reason or another. So as Austin writes this, that's and is brought back to you, something for your consideration. The other thing I will mention is we're bringing the attorney in on many of these quasi judicial meetings where we didn't used to do that, right? So I'm going to be asking, and I don't think Austin can do it, but we'll be working with Jeff to see if there's another attorney that can meet or attend every quasi judicial meeting from this point forward, just to help with questions as we go forward and to help with making sure that we're staying within the boundaries to protect you and the city.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Thank you, Denise.
Thanks, Denise. All right, folks. Well, that's pretty much all I had with that. I mean, I just felt that it was discussion since we had received these
Oh, I
emails
appreciate it.
with these letters, and I apologize, Joy, if it seemed out of place for me to mention the letter signatures, signer's name. I mean, we've all seen it, but I apologize. And
Okay, Doug.
go ahead, Denise.
There's one more thing I forgot to mention, because one of the things that we talked about is when an administrative review is done, there's no way to really, we don't post that. So we are now posting every Friday on our website. It is being posted of any major administrative. It's not every little thing that goes through, because we do a lot of those, right? But it's those bigger administrative reviews, and all it's under planning. So you can look at it, and it's posted every Friday before 5 o'clock. That is the goal. I will tell you, we're hoping that we don't miss it, but we are struggling just trying to stay on top of everything. But that is a direction that I'm planning to do, and it is a high priority, so everybody can see what's been administratively approved for transparency.
A lot of work.
Very good.
Helpful.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and close discussion on item 3 unless anybody else has any other comments or anything else of that nature. No, nobody. Okay. And then section 6, notice of council action. Do we have anything in that category? Karen?
I don't have anything to share.
Okay. All right. Very good then. Very good then. Well, as some of you know, I've realized this, that 3/31/22 is the end of my term as a commissioner with the Historic Preservation Commission. And I will think about that and let everybody know what kind of decision I'll make in the future.
Well, just know that the decisions that we make are going to be going past us for a couple generations. So just keep that in mind to hopefully persuade you to stay on.
Well, I appreciate that, Tamala. You know, I mean, I've been plugged into this community for a long time. My family's been here for over 100 years. So,
Yeah, your
and I've
insights are
done
invaluable.
my diligence as a private citizen, and hopefully as my term as a commissioner, to preserve the core of the history of this town on various levels.
And I'm so proud to be participating in the library, you know, to be part of all of that. I mean, that's going to be there for a long time, hopefully. And to know that we each had a part of that, that'll be very cool.
Right. Right. Very good. Okay. Well, I am going to call adjournment for the March 2nd, 2022 meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission. Thank you all, particularly you, Austin, for your input, and have a good evening.
You too. Bye-bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.